Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is gonna be a crochet tutorial which I haven't done in such a long time. In this video I'm gonna show you how to make a hooded scarf completely out of granny squares. This project is super beginner friendly since all you need to do is crochet granny squares pretty much. Let me put it on for you guys so you know what exactly you'll be making. This is what it looks like. I think it is super cute. It's just super adorable, especially with this granny square pattern. Okay, before we jump into the tutorial, just a few more extra information. You can follow the tutorial exactly along how I'm doing it, or you can use a thinner or thicker yarn, but then you need to remember to adjust the granny squares. My granny squares are 15 by 15 centimeters big. My hood is a bit oversized because I wanted to have it like just flowy and big, but if you want it a bit more fitted, you should adjust the size of the granny squares. So as you can see, my second granny square ends quite a bit below my chin, and that also means that if I tie the scarf, there will be space. But if you want it a lot more fitted, you can make the granny squares smaller, so that if you put two granny squares, one on the top of your head and one at the side, it will reach your jawline, because then the scarf will tie around here, which makes everything a lot more fitted. So if you want to have a very fitted balaclava, I think you should size down on the squares unless you have a much bigger head than I do, because then it might fit. But if you want to be on the safe side, before you crochet all of your granny squares, just crochet two, put one at the top of your head, one at the side, and see where it ends up. If it ends up at your jawline, you'll have a pretty fitted balaclava. If it ends up super low at your shoulders, then the hood will be very big. I would suggest having the granny square end somewhere between your jawline and like a few centimeters below that. Then you should be fine. But you can obviously also just blindly follow this tutorial. I'm pretty sure you'll be fine, but I just wanted to put it out there as a disclaimer since head shapes are differently. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, let me talk about the things you'll need. You'll obviously need yarn. I used a blue and like an off-white colored yarn. You can do it in one color, in two colors, in three colors. Go as crazy as you want. And I used around 300 grams of yarn. So 3 balls of the blue one and 3 of the white one. This is medium weighted yarn and it's recommended to use with a 5mm crochet hook, but because I wanted to keep the granny squares quite tight, I used a 4mm crocheting hook. So I went down one size just to make everything a bit tighter. And that's pretty much all you need. We can jump right into the tutorial. I'm gonna show you how I made the granny squares, but if you already know how to do granny squares, or if you want to use a different granny square pattern, you can obviously skip that step and meet me back here once you have at least 11 granny squares, or as I used in my hooded scarf, 13 granny squares. The more granny squares you'll have, the longer the scarf will be, and you can obviously make it super long. The only thing that you need to keep in mind is that you need an odd number of granny squares in total. So let's begin. Okay, I got my yarn ready, and this is the granny square that I'm gonna teach you. Obviously you can use more or less colors than I do, and you can also change up the color pattern, but this is just how I'm gonna do it. So grab the first color that you want to be in the middle, and you're gonna do a slip knot. And once you have your slip knot, you're gonna chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. And then you're gonna do a slip stitch in the back loop of the first chain. So here's your chain of 3, and this loop right there, that's where we're gonna insert our hook. And now you have one loop on your hook, and on the other side you have the V of the stitch. I'm gonna go ahead and insert a stitch marker so you can see where the middle will be, because once you connect it, it's gonna be a little bit hard to tell where the middle is. But after a while you kind of figure it out, but just to visualize it a bit better, I'm gonna insert the stitch marker. If you don't have a stitch marker, you can also use an earring or a piece of yarn. So just put the stitch marker on your chain like this, so that this will be in the middle of the circle. And now you're gonna slip stitch into the back loop of the first chain, like so. And you created a little circle, and in the middle of that circle is your stitch marker to show you where you need to continue crocheting. And now we're gonna create the first 4 clusters. So each cluster consists of 3 double crochets, and the first round consists of 4 clusters. You're always going to start each round with chaining up 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. This will be your first double crochet plus the corner. This right here is basically your last double crochet of the last cluster. It will make sense once we continue, but let's say this is our chain 4. So 2 of the chains are the height of the double crochet and the other 2 are here in the middle, and now we're going to continue with this first cluster. If you don't understand what I mean by this, just follow the tutorial, you will be fine, but this is just to kind of explain where we're at in the pattern. So now you chained 4 and you're going to insert into the middle, right where your stitch marker is, 3 double crochets. So yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through 2 loops, yarn over, and pull through the other 2 loops. And you're going to do that 3 times to create your first cluster. So now you made your first cluster of 3 double crochets, and this one right here is the double crochet of the last cluster that will be here in the end. And now you're going to create the corner. So you made the first cluster, you're going to chain up 2, 1 and 2. This will create the space that you need for these corners. And then you're going to do another cluster of 3 double crochets. And now you can already see your first corner. So this is the first cluster, your first corner, your second cluster, and now we're going to do the second corner. So chain up 2, 1, 2, and continue with the third cluster of double crochets. You reached another corner, so we're going to chain up 2, 1, 2, and now we reach the last cluster. And as you can see, we have this chain right here that doesn't belong to any cluster yet. And this is the last double crochet of the third cluster, meaning that now you only crochet 2 double crochets into the middle. 1 and 2. And then you connect it to this side to complete the first round and also to connect this double crochet into the cluster. And that's super easy. You're just going to insert your hook into the space. So not into a stitch, it's just in the space. And you're going to slip stitch it together, which pulls this chain closer to this cluster and completes it. So now you have 4 corners and 4 clusters. I'm gonna take out the stitch marker because we don't need it anymore. And as you can see, we finished our first round. And next up, I'm gonna use white, so I'm gonna show you how to change colors. So you're just gonna end the round here and pull the yarn through to make a little knot. I'm gonna continue with the white yarn. And what we're gonna do is every time we change colors, we're gonna finish up the round and add the yarn into the opposite corner of the previous round. By changing the corners, it's gonna become a much more even square, because if you continue in the same corner all the time, your granny square is at higher risk to become a bit wonky. You can obviously also change it after each round, but I think that's a bit unnecessary, so I just do it whenever I switch the colors. So we're gonna do a slip knot on the second color as well. And we take it off the hook. We insert the hook into the space, so not into a chain, it's just in the space of the corner. And then we're going to put the second color onto our hook and pull it through. And as I said in the beginning, we're going to start each round with a chain of 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this again creates the last double crochet of the last cluster. And now we're just going to continue the pattern by adding 3 double crochets into that corner. So 1, 2, and 3. And now we're just gonna jump right into the next corner. And we're not gonna chain in between. So we just made this cluster. And now we're gonna do this cluster. And this is a side piece, so we're not gonna chain anything on the side. We're just jumping right into the next space. So yarn over, go into the next corner, pull through 2 loops, pull through another 2 loops, and do 2 more double crochets. And now we've reached the corner, so we're gonna chain 2. You're always gonna chain 2 in each corner to create that space. And then you're gonna do another cluster into that same corner. And that's how you create the first corner of the second round. Next up, we're again at the side of the granny square, so we're not gonna chain anything, but jump straight into the next space and do a cluster of 3 double crochets. We reach another corner, so chain 2, 1, 2. And now we do the second cluster into that corner. And as you can see, the square is coming along. We are again at the side of the granny square, so no chains. We're jumping straight into the next space and do our first cluster. And this is again a corner, so we're chaining up 2 and adding the second cluster into that same space. And now we are again at the end of the round, and here again you have your chain 4 from when you started the round, which acts as the double crochet of the last cluster plus the chain 2 for the corner. So instead of doing 3 double crochets in that space, we're only going to do 2 and connect it to the chain so that we finish up the last cluster. So yarn over, do your first double crochet, then do your second. And now to connect the chain to the cluster again, you're just going to insert your hook into the space and do a slip stitch. And now you have your second round of the granny square. We're again going to finish the round because I'm changing colors. So pull through, cut the yarn, and just pull tight. So as you can see, we've done the first 2 rounds of the granny square, and next up are 2 rounds of the same color. And I'm going to show you one more round because now we not only have the corners, but we also have spaces on the sides of the granny square. So let me show you how you continue. So to change colors, I'm again going to do a slip knot with the new color. Find the opposite corner of your last round, insert the hook, and pull the new color through. And now again we're starting the round by chaining 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And into that same space we're going to put the first cluster of the round. So you have your 3 double crochets and the last double crochet of the last cluster that will appear here. And now, because we're at the sides again, we're not going to chain. We're just going to jump right into the space and add a cluster. And we're still at the side of the granny square, so we're jumping right into this space without any chains. So yarn over and do your set of 3 double crochets. And now we are at the corner, so we're gonna chain 2 and add another cluster of double crochets into that same space. We are at the side of the granny square again, so no chains, just straight up into the space and adding a cluster. Again, still at the side, so just adding a cluster into the next space. And now we're at the corner again, so chain 2 and add another cluster of 3 double crochets into that space. And you're going to continue that until the end of the round. So no chains at the side of the granny square, and in each corner you're going to chain up 2 and add another cluster. So we reached the end of the round, and if you realize that your granny square is like kind of curling inward, don't worry, just pull a bit at the sides and it will stretch out, so that's not a problem. And as always, when we reach the end of the round, we're gonna add 2 double crochets into that last space and connect the chain 4 from the beginning to that cluster. So yarn over, do your first double crochet, yarn over again and do your second double crochet, and now slip stitch this chain onto the cluster. And now you finish the third round, and because I'm not changing colors, I'm also not going to change the corners. So now that the rounds are connected, we're just going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to continue the pattern like we did in the other rounds. So in each corner you will have 2 clusters. In the middle of those 2 clusters you have a chain 2. And on the sides of the granny squares, you just have the clusters and no chains in between. And now each round will have more spaces on the side, so it will get bigger and bigger. So now you have your clusters in the corner, you have a cluster here, here, and then again the clusters in the corner. And as I said in the beginning, I'm going to do 2 rounds of the blue and then 2 rounds of the white and then 1 last round of the blue. So my granny squares have a total of 7 rounds. Join me on my floor as I'm too lazy to get up. I've just finished crocheting 13 granny squares, and the amount of granny squares depends on how long you want the scarf to be. I would say you need at least 11 to like fully have a scarf, but if you want a super long scarf, you obviously need more granny squares. But yeah, these are all my granny squares. I started weaving in the ends on some of these, but a few of them still have the ends sticking out because I cannot be bothered to do it anymore. But now that you have all your granny squares, the heart, like the long part, is actually done, and now we're just connecting them. So for the hood you need 4 granny squares, 1 at the top and 3 at the sides, and that means that the top granny square is also connected to 3 granny squares. And I'm gonna use an invisible seam to connect all the granny squares, but you can also slip stitch them together or sew them together in any way. Whatever you prefer works, as long as the granny squares are in the right position. So just as a quick explanation, you're going to face the granny squares right side up, and then you're going to flip them together so that the right sides are facing each other. And then you're going to connect the back loops of each granny square. So this is the back side and this is the back side. So the back loops of the front granny square are the ones facing you, and the back loops of the back granny square are the ones facing away from you. And then you just sew these together. I'm gonna start in the corner, and always make sure you are in the same stitch in the front and the back square, because all of these stitches are the same amount, so you need to find the right one. And then you go to the next. And once you're finished, you can cut the yarn off and make a knot, and that's how you connect the granny squares with an invisible seam. Okay, this is what it should look like. You kind of have a little box. You're gonna turn it right side out again, and then you have your hood part. I am so excited. So this is what it should look like. Okay, so next you're gonna take the rest of your granny squares and connect them all to one big scarf. So just connect them in one big line, and once you have the scarf part, you're gonna take your hood and connect your scarf onto the bottom of the hood, and then you're pretty much done. So let me do that real quick. Okay guys, I'm still on the floor, and excuse the lighting, but Hamburg isn't really giving us any sunlight in wintertime. But I just finished sewing all of the squares together. This was a lot more work than anticipated, but you know what? Be prepared. I love crocheting, but I hate sewing stuff together by hand. So the last part really sucked everything out of my soul. But we made it. And now we have one last crochet step to do until we're done. I thought I would show you how it should look like. So here you have the hood part, and then this is the scarf. I am obsessed. I'm also obsessed with the color combination. It's so cute. So basically you can also stop right here. But one last step I want to do is crochet a border of single crochets all around the balaclava just to make it a little bit more neat, because here you can see it's not 100% straight. That might be my mistake, like maybe I just didn't sew them together perfectly, but doing a border around it will make everything look a lot cleaner and just more finished. So I'm sorry, I'm obsessed with this, but I'm just gonna add a border of single crochets in white, and I will put up on the screen how many rounds I did it because I'm not sure yet. But yeah, I'm gonna do that right now, and I'm gonna talk to you tomorrow once everything is done and show you the finished end result. I cannot believe that we are finally done. I kid you not, weaving in all those ends was a nightmare. But I think it was totally worth it in the end, because I am obsessed with this hooded scarf. I also like that it's kind of oversized because it just gives me a much more cozier feeling. But as I said in the beginning, feel free to adjust the granny squares for your liking. And as always, if you followed along this tutorial and you made this hooded scarf, please send me a picture over on Instagram, because I really want to see what you created. And yeah, I think my job here is done. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and maybe stick around on my channel. I gotta admit, I don't do as many crocheting videos as I want to, but I do a lot of other fun things on my channel, so I hope you stick around, and I'll see you next week with a new video. Bye!